Hey, I'm a former Legionnaire from an infantry company that spent more time in dust, heat, and broken city blocks than in any parade formation. What I'm sharing now isn't a lesson, and it isn't nostalgia. It's the kit we trusted because it kept answering when everything else around us was falling apart. And that begins with the HK416F, the rifle that became the Legion's new spine. The first time you shoulder it, the feeling is straightforward. Dense, balanced, almost stubborn in how it settles into the pocket. The controls fall under your fingers cleanly, no quirks, no drifting edges, and the whole frame feels built for places where sand gets into everything and rain turns metal slick. On the range, the recoil comes back in a predictable driving push that never surprises you, and the rifle tracks through target transitions without asking for correction. But in daily work, you learn its character properly. The weight accumulates on long movements. The front end reminds you of itself during endless hours in vehicles, and the sling can tug uncomfortably when gear piles up. Still, once you enter an alley, hold a rooftop, or push through a half-collapsed building, the 416 settles into its real role. Steady, obedient, unfazed by dirt or neglect. It handles moisture without complaint, cycles clean after days in dust, and keeps its sight picture stable even when your hands are shaking from cold or fatigue. It only falters when mobility shrinks to knife-fight distances, where something shorter would breathe better. Yet it stayed in our hands because the operators who carried it didn't need charm. They needed certainty. And the 416F delivered that certainty every time the selector clicked and the moment tightened into a single breath. And when you've spent enough time with the 416, you start remembering the rifle that shaped generations before it. The famous F1, and later the G2, a design that feels more like a relic and a companion at the same time. The first time you pick it up again after working with newer platforms, the bullpup layout hits you immediately. The weight sits tight against the shoulder, the center of mass pulled inward in a way that makes the whole thing feel shorter than it looks. The grip angle is unusual if you didn't grow up with it. The trigger has that spongy travel everyone warns you about, and the charging handle feels like it came from a different era entirely. On the range, the recoil steps back into you with a quick, sharp pulse, easy to follow, but never as smooth as more modern rifles. And in daily tasks, the quirks show themselves fast. The sling points can twist at the wrong moments. The balance takes getting used to during long patrols. And the unique manual of arms demands attention you don't have during high-tempo movement. Still, inside vehicles, tight courtyards, or narrow stairwells, the FAMAS shows why it stayed so long. Its compact length makes it easy to maneuver without catching on door frames or packs, and the forward weight, or lack of it, lets you keep the rifle raised longer than you'd expect. But when the environment turns rough, thick mud, sand, cold mornings when metal bites through gloves, it reminds you of its age. It doesn't forgive neglect the way newer rifles do, and it can feel temperamental when pushed into long, punishing cycles. Yet it remains in training lines and parade formations because the people who started with it still understand its rhythm, and the Legion keeps it alive for tasks where familiarity and tradition matter more than modernity. For them, the FAMAS isn't outdated. It's a reminder of a time when the rifle demanded as much from the shooter as the shooter demanded from it. And when the rifle isn't the tool you reach for, when space closes or your primary hangs useless for a second too long, that's where the Glock 17 Gen 5 steps in. The first time you grip it, nothing stands out. No polished lines, no theatrics, just a frame that fits the hand without asking for adjustment. The recoil on the range is a clean hop, easy to track, easy to recover. The kind that keeps your focus forward instead of fighting the gun. Daily carry shows its real nature. The polymer feels almost too light after hours of handling steel. The slide edges can scrape if your draw gets lazy, and the grip texture asks you to stay honest on wet days. But inside vehicles, during transitions, or when a hallway collapses into chaos, the Glock gives you exactly what you need. A simple, steady answer that doesn't hesitate. It isn't refined, and it isn't meant to be. It stayed because in the moment when everything narrows to instinct, it fires when your hand tightens, no questions asked. And when the squad needs more than precision shots or clean transitions, when the whole rhythm of the fight depends on steady pressure, that's when the FN Minimi becomes the anchor everyone leans on. The first time you shoulder it, the weight settles differently. Not awkward, just honest. A reminder that you're carrying the section's heartbeat. The grip feels utilitarian. The stock plants firmly, and the whole frame vibrates with a low tension the moment you prep the first burst. On the range, the recoil doesn't snap. It rolls, a continuous push that you guide rather than resist, letting you walk rounds across a space without losing control. In daily work, though, it shows its demands. The sling tugs harder on long marches, the barrel heats faster than you'd like, and moving it through cramped interiors feels like dragging a beam through tight corners. But the moment you face open ground, an exposed alley, or a contact that threatens to break momentum, the Minimi proves its worth. It lays down a curtain of presence that buys the squad time to advance, to peel back, to breathe. It falters only when discretion or speed matters more than volume. Nothing about it is subtle, yet it stayed because the operators who carried it understood the responsibility. You're not just another rifle in the line. You're the one who sets the pace, who shapes the fight so others can move. And for that role, the Minimi delivers exactly what the team needs, every time. And when the fight stretches beyond what a single rifleman or a light gun can hold, when the team needs real depth behind its movement, that's where the FN MAG 58 steps into its own place. The first time you handle it, the weight isn't a surprise. It's a declaration. This isn't something you swing around in tight rooms. It's a weapon meant to anchor ground, to hold space with a kind of authority lighter guns can't imitate. The action cycles with a heavy, deliberate rhythm, the kind that tells you it was built for long bursts, long ranges, and long days behind the shield of its tripod, or a vehicle mount. On the range, the recoil comes through your whole frame like a slow wave, steady and predictable as long as you respect its timing. In daily work, though, you feel every part of its personality. Carrying it is a commitment. Setting it up takes patience, and moving it across uneven terrain turns every step into a reminder of its mass. But once it's in position, on a ridge at a crossroads, mounted on a light vehicle or dug in behind a berm, the MAG becomes something else entirely. It projects a kind of stability that changes how the team moves, how the enemy thinks, how the fight unfolds. It doesn't belong indoors, and it isn't a weapon you bring to stay light. It slows you down, demands space, and refuses to be rushed. Yet it remained because the kind of fights that need it don't care about comfort. They care about control. The operators who ran the MAG understood that their job wasn't mobility. It was presence. The kind of presence that holds a line long enough for everyone else to do theirs. And for that purpose, the MAG never failed to deliver. And when the squad needs reach without giving up mobility entirely, when you're walking that line between a rifleman and a sniper, the SCAR HPR becomes the tool that fits the gap. The first time you bring it to the shoulder, the weight tells you it's not a standard battle rifle. Heavier up front, steadier at the stock, built for measured shots rather than frantic bursts. The controls feel familiar if you've lived with modern platforms. The recoil comes back in a heavy, rolling pulse that rewards slow hands, and the sight picture settles quickly once you learn its rhythm. In daily work, you notice both its promise and its demands. Carrying it through long patrols tugs at your spine, and the length asks for space you don't always have in cramped urban corners. But the moment you step into a position with a view, a rooftop, a ridgeline, a break in the tree line, the PR shows why it was chosen. It holds stability through breath, through wind, through the small tremors that come with exhaustion. It gives you controlled authority over mid-range threats, the kind that disrupt movement before they ever get close. It falters only when you try to force it into close quarters tempo. It wasn't meant for doorways or rapid clearing, yet it stayed because the marksman who carried it understood its purpose. You're not chasing perfection at distance. You're shaping the fight just far enough ahead to keep the rest of the squad safe. And for that role, the SCAR HPR fits like a tool that knows exactly what it's meant to do. And when the job demands influence over extreme distance, when the only thing separating you from hardened vehicles or fortified positions is a precise single round, that's where the PGM Hécate 2 earns its place. The first time you shoulder it, the weight is immediate. Heavy, deliberate, the kind that forces you to slow down, to breathe, to respect every movement. The bolt cycles with a deliberate cadence, smooth but demanding, the stock locks solidly, and the barrel tracks with a cold precision that makes every small adjustment feel consequential. On long observation points, you notice its real nature. It isn't forgiving to rushed handling. It doesn't adjust to sloppy support, and carrying it over distance reminds you that patience is part of its design. But when the shot opens up a clear line, when the target is beyond normal reach and accuracy becomes life or death, it's almost uncanny how the Hécate aligns with intention. The vibrations through the frame, the predictability of the recoil, the stability of the sight, all of it lets you place the round exactly where it's needed. It falters only when mobility or tempo are required. It isn't meant to move fast. It's meant to hold, to dominate from a single, deliberate position. Yet it stays in the Legion's arsenal because the operators who carry it understand its purpose. Influence far beyond what smaller tools can offer. A deliberate hand behind the lines that shapes the battlefield without exposing itself. For them, the Hécate isn't overkill. It's authority realized in steel. And when the fight compresses again into hallways, stairwells, and locked doors, when the only thing standing between you and immediate entry is a barrier that won't give, that's when the Benelli Supernova tactical comes alive. The first time you shoulder it, the weight feels compact but firm. The stock settles into the shoulder without fuss, and the pump action slides smooth and predictable, almost like it's built for repetition rather than flair. On the range, the recoil is a solid, driving push, not punishing, but undeniable. And the sight aligns naturally for the kind of short, controlled spreads you need in tight quarters. Daily work quickly shows both its virtues and limits. Moving through cluttered interiors, the length demands attention, the sling pulls against gear, and you can feel the balance shifting if you're forced to swing or pivot fast. But when the moment comes, a locked doorway, a barricaded room, a point of sudden contact, the Supernova delivers authority instantly. It's heavy enough to make presence felt, yet manageable enough to cycle under stress. It falters if you try to extend it to longer lines of fire or keep it as a general-purpose tool. But for operators who push first and break through, it's exactly what they reach for. And that's why it stays. not as a primary for distance, but as the decisive tool for entry, for control in spaces where hesitation could cost the team everything. And when brute force becomes the only language the situation understands, when no rifle or shotgun can shift what's in front of you, that's when the AT4 F2 steps forward. The first time you lift it onto your shoulder, the tube feels lighter than you expect, but carries a weight of intention that has nothing to do with mass. The grip is basic, the sights are straightforward, and the whole system feels like a tool built for clarity. One shot, one decision, no corrections. In training, the process is almost ritualistic. Remove, aim, commit. There's no luxury of follow-up, no margin for doubt. And in daily operations, you feel exactly why its simplicity matters. It handles cleanly in cramped vehicles, doesn't snag much on gear, and stays intuitive even when stress climbs. But the moment you put it into play is when the F2 reveals its real character. It's not subtle. It's not forgiving. It's a straight answer to fortified positions, light armor, or structures that need to be opened without sending someone dangerously close. Where it falters is in flexibility. Once you fire, it's gone. And until then, it's a long tube you must treat with respect. But it stayed because the kind of threats it answers haven't disappeared. The operators who carry it know that when the fight demands immediate, decisive impact, there's no substitute for a tool that does exactly that. Once, cleanly, and with finality. For them, the AT4 isn't an accessory. It's the breaker you keep for the moment nothing else will move. And when the fight stretches far beyond the reach of rifles, machine guns, or single-shot launchers, when the threat sits behind armor or entrenched inside structures you can't afford to approach, that's when the Akeron MP becomes the tool you trust. The first time you work with it, the system feels more like a conversation than a weapon. A guided track, a calm sequence of steps where every action must be deliberate. The weight is balanced but significant. The controls more intricate than anything handheld, and the guidance interface forces you into a mindset where hesitation has no place. On training grounds, you learn its rhythm: steady grip, clear sighting, disciplined follow-through. It isn't rushed, and it doesn't forgive sloppy handling. In daily deployments, the reality sets in. Carrying it means responsibility. Setting it up means exposing yourself just long enough to commit. And firing it means accepting that the outcome will reshape whatever it touches. But when it's time to deal with hard targets, armored vehicles, fortified positions, deep enclosures, the Akeron shows exactly why it replaced older systems. Precision becomes a form of control. Guidance turns distance into safety. Impact becomes certainty instead of hope. It falters only when the tempo is too fast, or the environment too confined for a system that needs space to breathe. Yet it stayed because the operators who rely on it understand its purpose: to remove obstacles no one else can approach, to shift the balance of a fight with a single well-placed answer. For them, the Akeron MP isn't just a weapon. It's the quiet, decisive hand that ends problems before they reach the squad's line.